So, welcome back. We're going to do season one, episode 10 of this podcast. This is going to wrap up our season one, and I have a special guest. It's going to be a little bit different today because we don't have a specific topic. We didn't have the stories at the beginning like you've kind of become accustomed to. But we have somebody who's going to kind of take everything because he's amazing at everything that we've learned throughout like the service part of this podcast and walk us through with like a little bit more detail than we've had so far. So we've got Andy Adams today. And Andy, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to the listener we have.
Thanks so much, Jesse. As always, you're too kind. For your listeners, I have been in behavior analysis for over 10 years. I also, as some of your other guests, I kind of got my start at the Assert Preschool for kids with autism up at Utah State University, and really just fell in love with the way that applied behavior analysis makes learning fast and focuses on goals and behaviors that really make a meaningful difference for kids and their parents. I have spent a lot of time working with adults with disabilities as well as kids, and have kind of seen the full gamut of difficulties that can come with autism and other developmental disorders.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I know we have a lot of deep conversations. We've known each other for over a decade, and I feel like we've talked about a lot of things, and so I'm really excited to see what ends up coming out today. And I'm excited that this actually gets to be recorded, unlike so many of our other deep conversations about the field and our profession and helping people and what that should look like. I want to start with episode 6. Obviously, we're not really going to cover like the diagnostic process or anything like that, other earlier episodes. But with episode 6, it talks about finding an ABA service provider. And I kind of wanted to get like your thoughts with a awesome episode with Christine Manning, but I wanted to see like if you're talking to families or if someone says like, hey, I'm thinking about ABA, what's kind of the process, or what would you have them maybe consider as they're looking for an ABA provider?
I think that's a fantastic question. Some of your other guests have a great job at addressing, making sure that the ABA provider you're finding is a good fit. I think, at the end of the day, RBTs make a big difference in your life and your children's lives, and don't be hesitant to get on multiple waiting lists. I treat it as if you would treat finding a pediatrician, right? You may live in a place where there's only one or two, but most people have an option between multiple different companies. And don't hesitate once you are with a company to be vocal about how the RBT and the BCBA is working for you and your family. Look for someone that you feel has an appropriate combination of competence and compassion. And I know that, especially for parents, you may not know if they're competent, or, you don't have a bachelor's or master's degree in applied behavior analysis. And so look for someone that can answer questions well and with confidence. And most of all, has compassion for you in your situation as well as your child.
So how do you know if like if you're a behavior analyst, your treatment team is kind of like right for you? Like I feel like ABA is just such a different service than like, you know, dentistry or pediatrician, right? So like I don't even care if I like my dentist. I don't care if that person's a total jerk to me. I just care if they're good at their job. But I don't feel like it's the same with ABA. Like how do you kind of like gauge if you're a family, if you're, like someone receiving services or the caregiver for somebody receiving services, like if it just feel it out, or like how do you kind of know if somebody's competent and if they're a good fit for you?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. For context, I have a sister-in-law with 4 kids with autism, and they have, because of her husband's job, moved from state to state and have had multiple different providers. One of their first BCBAs they're still in contact with and still talk with, and I love that. It's it can be difficult to know before services start if that is going to be a good provider for you. And I think there's lots of things you can do once they are providing services for you and your family. But before that happens, it doesn't hurt to, jump on Facebook, jump on Google, find parent groups. There are multiple different parent groups for families with a child with autism. Many of them have opinions, have been through multiple providers, um, and obviously you've been on the internet before. Like, everyone has something bad to say, but you can start to see patterns. There's people that have had bad experiences with every company, but you can begin to see patterns and notice what different priorities different companies have. And like you said, some people, like, as long as a dentist is going to do a good job, like, I don't care if he's a jerk. Um, Not only is that a little bit different from you to another person, but that's a little different from dentistry to applied behavior analysis, right? If the dentist is going to be in your home 10 to 20 hours a week, that may change your opinion. And so um,
It absolutely would.
make sure that you talk with other people. And once you have services, make sure that you talk. Make sure that you can and do have an open communication with the BCBA you're working with, as well as other administrators where applicable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the theme that we've really been trying to go for this whole season one, and honestly, if and when there's a season two, um, that that will continue is just like empowering, um, the autism community. We want people to like learn not only that it's okay to ask questions, but like what questions might be important to a lot of people, right? And so yeah, I think that's I love your answer, and I love the way that you can kind of like put it in a way, and that like that I think is very like consumable, very very easy to get on board with. um, I do feel like we talked about like the getting started process pretty well in episode 6. We talked about kind of like assessments, and how it's kind of different with each insurance company or funder on how to get started. So we covered kind of the basics, but is there anything that you'd want to kind of point out or add on for any families?
I don't think so. I think I would say that, as you're going through the assessment process, as you're getting to know the people in the company you're working with, you don't have to know every single assessment. But I would counsel you to be present to some degree to see that the person you're working with, has compassion, has a connection with your child to some degree. Not every assessor needs to be the most bubbly, compassionate person ever, but if it feels incredibly sterile, or if you get a weird feeling there, ask more questions and keep a close eye. I believe in applied behavior analysis that compassion needs to be a guiding principle for what we do. And um, certainly no judgment, because many practitioners experience compassion fatigue, and it can be difficult, walking every day with compassion. But I do feel like if that piece is very obviously missing and you're seeing that in the assessment phase with your child, that should be, kind of a red flag, and keep your eyes open and consider your options.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And honestly, we're as behavior analysts, we're kind of trained problem solvers. Like we should be able to actually, Andy, that's your new like thing. You have to figure out how to make sure that everybody is compassionate in our fields, and just fix anybody who's going through that. That's
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 that's an
that's
easy
my goal
problem,
for you.
Jesse. I'll take the weekend and make sure that happens.
Okay, cool. It's gonna take the whole weekends.
I mean, it's not a 4-day weekend, so yeah, sorry.
No, okay, fair enough, fair enough. Um, so, okay, so we've gone through the assessment. You got a provider. They're compassionate. They're lovely. Um, just kind of like, what does services kind of look like, and maybe like break it up too by the service that you're receiving. I think a lot of people who are receiving services because they have autism have kind of that traditional model, RBT, BCBA supervisor, that kind of thing. Maybe we start there, but there are also, as we know, different ways to kind of receive services. So we'll start there, and then we'll move on to what it might look like for a non-traditional approach. But what can families kind of expect, or individuals who are receiving services expect, um, like once they're ready to go for that ongoing services?
Jesse, I think you put it really well that as behavior analysts, we're problem solvers. I think that is the same with many people that come into your home, right? Like you call a plumber because, and then the plumber comes in and solves a problem. When you have a plumber, there's either water where it shouldn't be or no water where there should be, right? And the same thing is with a behavior analyst. There may be behavior occurring where you really wish it wasn't, or wish it wasn't occurring in that context or with that intensity, or there's behavior that should be occurring that's not, right? And so, as a behavior analyst, like a plumber, we come into your home and we analyze that. We problem solve. Okay, is behavior not occurring that really should be? Those behaviors may look like, I wish I wish my child was better able to communicate their wants and needs. I wish my child was better able to get themselves dressed in the morning or brush their teeth. And then there are issues where, there's water where there shouldn't be. There's behavior occurring where it shouldn't be. Maybe that is, my child is throwing a fit or having a tantrum. My behavior is, my child is, babbling and talking and screaming in the middle of their, church service. My child is having bedwetting issues. All these behaviors that are happening, and we really wish they wouldn't. And so, a behavior analyst approach, like a plumber, is going to be different depending on whether there's a behavior deficit, right? Behavior is not happening when it should be, or a behavior excess. Behavior is happening, and we really wish it wasn't, or wasn't happening to that degree. So, our toolkit, just like a plumber, is totally different depending on which type of scenario is happening. And we can kind of go through exactly, more fully how we diagnose and what that looks like. Um, but essentially, behavior analyst is there to solve problems. And we have different toolkits to get behaviors to start and continue than the tools we use to help behavior, lessen or stop altogether.
Hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times I feel like they're kind of related too, which is exciting. I think it's also maybe valuable to just like pause here too, and like I think as professionals, we sometimes I think have, I mean, we have different definitions for a lot of very common words, and I think the word problem just by itself is one of those too, where it's like a problem. I think we think of it as something as like just like bad in our everyday life, and I think it does have a little bit of a different lens through behavior analysis. It's something where there's room for like improvement, I think. And so like if like a kid is never like problematic, right? Like, and I think sometimes that gets lost in kind of the shuffle, especially when we're talking about someone who's compassionate. It's never like the kid, right? It's the situation. And we're going in and helping, I think, that child in this circumstance, that child be more the person that they want to be, right? Like we all we've all melted down. Doesn't matter like how old you are or anything like that. And none of us feel good afterwards. But if we can teach somebody to do something in kind of a cooler way, a better way, that they're much more proud of afterwards, I think that's like really like what we're kind of like talking about when we're talking about like problem solving. And I just feel like it's an important point to kind of clarify, especially with, and we'll talk about sifting through information like about ABA, but I think especially with some of the opposition to ABA that we've seen recently, it's an important point to kind of clarify. What are your thoughts?
I 100% agree with that, Jesse. I yesterday spent time with a 14-year-old, and he had had a really bad day the day before, and I said, you know what, it has been 5 or 6 years since I put a hole in sheetrock, and I kind of explained to him the situations that led to me punching a hole in the wall. And as behavior analysts, sometimes we're bad with language, kind of like you said, but I hope that parents know and understand that as a behavior analyst, one of our core tenets, our core beliefs, is that all behavior is rational, and that um, the child is simply doing the best with the situation that they have, and a lot of that comes down to what's going on with their disability. And so, as problem solvers, we don't see your child as the problem, right? The child is not the problem. Sometimes we say problem behavior, but it's simply behavior that is uh, maybe problematic for them and for their environment, and there are better behaviors that they could engage in that would help them and everyone around them. And it's not their fault that that behavior is occurring, but there are things that we can do to change their environment that can help them and help you as a parent. We say all behavior is rational, right? Like, with that child, they're doing the best they can in the environment they have. So I talked with this kid yesterday about, hey, like, I have a bad day. Like, there's no one exists that doesn't have bad days. And it's not your fault that you had a bad day. I simply want to know from your perspective if there are things that maybe contributed to being a bad day so that we can do better, so that we can figure out and change our behavior to maybe help you have more better days.
I love it. Yeah, and thanks for like kind of going down that tangent with me too. I was like all prepared for like the next thing we're going to talk about, and then I was like, oh, we should spend some time on this because I do think it's important, and I think that you're always very insightful with kind of the way you think, and just everybody likes you. So it's a good model, I think, for anybody who's like maybe considering being a practitioner or an early level practitioner to kind of learn the vernacular, or maybe like the way to talk about these these again problems and the way that we're talking about them in behavior analysis. um, and I just really, yeah, appreciate your perspective on these.
I appreciate that, Jesse. Again, you're too kind. I do believe that words matter. And
Hmm.
as we talk, not only in this podcast, but throughout, the profession as behavior analysts work with parents, I want to apologize because as behavior analysts, we're idiots sometimes. And like a doctor or a dentist, right, or a plumber, we're going to use words that either make no sense to you or might offend you. And we mean no offense, and hope that we can communicate in ways that display compassion and competence and a desire to help you and your family.
Hmm. Right, because it's I mean, you don't have to pick one, right? Like it's not teaching effectively or teaching compassionately. Those can very easily go together, and I think sometimes we create that false dichotomy. um, so I'm completely in alignment. Um, so we okay. You talked about like kind of going in, figuring out what's going on. We've got our tool belt. We're gonna like fix things, or address things, like depending on, like where the to extend your plumber analogy, like where the leakage is, or where for us where the person wants to kind of like learn something or find a different way of doing something. There's a lot of ways to teach. How do behavior analysts decide what to teach, how to teach it? I know that's a big question. Feel free to take all the time.
That's a fantastic question. Um, as a behavior analyst comes into your home, a lot of times they're going to be focusing on, for lack of a better word, those behavior deficits, right? Behavior isn't happening that we'd really like to happen. Sometimes that's communication. Sometimes those like hygiene skills or community safety skills, things related to health and safety, like they won't put on their seatbelt, they can't tell me when they're in pain. Um, and as a behavior analyst, one of the first questions that we need to ask is that problem like a can do problem or a won't do problem? Meaning sometimes and oftentimes, and when we go do assessments, we see if a child or learner can, do X, Y, or Z, and they're not willing to do it. And we come back next week and, oh my gosh, now that we have a relationship with your child, they're totally spouting off all these different answers, and we see that they do have all these skills, but we're a weird adult coming into their house and we smell funny and they're not going to do that for us. So
Right.
there are some of these behavior deficits, right, where a learner, a child, can do that thing, but they're not going to do it. And our approach to problems where a person can do it but won't do it is totally different than an approach where the person just can't do it at all. They would do it if they could, but they can't do it at all.
Hmm.
Um, so if the person can do but won't do, our interventions are going to rely on some form of reinforcement. There's additional things we may tweak, but reinforcement being a way to reward the person at different times or in different ways for engaging in that behavior when they ought to be. If the problem is a can't do but they would do, then we're really going to rely on shaping and other, breaking that skill or behavior down into smaller pieces that we can then teach them, along with, really rewarding them for engaging in those smaller pieces to build up to the larger skill of, oh, now they can put on their pants or whatever it might be.
Cool. And I like the examples that you have too, just of like what the skills are, because I think a lot of times um it can be easy to go on autopilot. And I like putting your pants on, that's gonna be important no matter who you are, if you're over the age of like 2. Um so that's yeah, and I think those are important skills too. And yeah, I also just really like that you're thinking about like motivation versus like skill and can do, will do. Um, so okay, let's say we'll go into this just like a little bit deeper, and I want to kind of like empower. I know there's a lot of wait lists and a lot of different places for services, right? And so, like let's say obviously like we're gonna recommend like get somebody who knows who's been like educated, gone through like a whole bunch of practicum hours and been supervised and passed the test and all that. But if you're a parent, you're on a waiting list and you're like you've been told over and over and over how important early intervention is, um, and you can't get early intervention. What are like some quick ways where like parents could tell if it's a can do or won't do, or like what are some maybe like things that parents could do to teach like those incremental skills just as parents for kids who maybe like learn a little bit differently than other kids?
I love that question, and it saddens me that there are parents in that situation. Again, I have a family member who's currently back on a wait list in a different state, and um, and I think you don't have to be a practitioner to recognize the difference between the two. So, if your child, if you notice that they will do certain things with you that they won't do with your spouse, or vice versa, or that when motivation is strong, like it's right before their favorite activity, or they're really happy that they can do that thing, then you're looking at more of kind of like just as you said, that motivation piece, right? So in those situations where you've seen them do it before, but they don't do it consistently, that's where you may look at, as a practitioner, we'd say like kind of arranging their reinforcers. But what we mean by that is providing rewards in certain ways or making a special treat or special activity contingent upon them engaging in that activity. Right? Offer some sort of special praise, special reward, some sort of party for when they are willing to engage in that behavior, while granting them grace that everyone has bad days, and there may be days despite that you have to help them pull on their pants, or you may have to help them, um, you may have to make sure that they do get their milk and cereal even if they're not asking for it appropriately.
Mhm.
If you are noticing that despite all of the rewards, despite all of the encouragement, they just can't do that thing. You've never seen them do it. A good approach is breaking that skill down. And again, granting your child grace. What you can do, for instance, if we're talking about pulling on pants, you help them get the left leg in, you help them get the right leg in, you pull the pants up to their upper thigh, and then you help them pull the pants up to the waist. And then you kind of, pare that back a little bit. And next time you help left leg, right leg, and pull it up to their knees, and they have to pull it from their knees to their waist. And gradually move yourself away from the amount of help you give. I know as a parent, I've got 4 kids myself. A lot of times it's just easier to do it for them than to teach them to do it themselves. Like I'm
And much
totally
faster.
so much faster and so much easier. And it is an investment. Applied behavior analysis is an investment. And you may have to invest some time on the front end to say, okay, like, no, now you've got to pull it up from your ankles to your waist. But believe and know that next week is going to be easier because of the work you put in today. And next month is going to be easier than next week because of the work you put in next week. And before you know it, your child has skills that really make your life and their life better.
What a great answer. um, and yeah, I do think like we have a whole episode on caregiver involvement and what that kind of looks like and all that, which, as with everything in ABA, different for every person. But yeah, I think being able to just be like empowered to know that you're doing the right thing, and like if if you don't scale it back fast enough, like nothing's getting messed up, right? Like if we have that day and we're like, today is not a day where I have like a whole minute to wait for somebody to put on their pants, like it's okay, like real life happens. And I think that's a really good perspective. Like nobody is expecting perfection, hopefully, from any parent. Like I hope my kids don't. They're going to be sorely disappointed. But so I think it's like also allowing like yourself as a parent, like a little bit of that same grace that we're extending to our kids too. So uh, Andy, you talked about the internet a little bit earlier. As with everything, the internet is it's an interesting place. It can be great. It can be a good source of information. It can be a breeding ground for trolls. It can be, misinformation or disinformation. It's all over the place. Obviously, anybody who's Googled applied behavior analysis, that's like no exception as well. Earlier this season, we did talk about kind of like identifying reputable sources, or like how to know how to find accurate information. What maybe do you say? And man, someday I'd actually really love to have like a debate, or like a discussion between somebody who's much smarter than me and like a proponent of ABA, and somebody who has some concerns. But maybe that's a season 2 or season 3 thing. But what would you recommend to like a family, to just like who says like, I've read some things online, I have some concerns, about whatever. What's typically like your way to respond to that, or make somebody maybe feel better about their decision to seek out services?
I think that is a fantastic question, Jesse. As you kind of mentioned, and as we talked about earlier, there is good and bad to be said on the internet about everything that you hold dear. If you are participating in a religion, you can easily go find plenty of people that hate your religion. If you're participating in a political party, like so easy to go find all the reasons that you're wrong on the internet. And the same is to be said for applied behavior analysis. There are people that do applied behavior analysis poorly. And that's sad, but there are bad dentists, there are bad doctors, there are bad lawyers, there are bad presidents, there are bad
Plumbers.
bad plumbers, bad priests, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Jesse and I talked earlier about there is very little in this world that is binary, meaning that there is, we don't believe that all applied behavior analysis is good, right? I think it'd be important for your parents to know that one of the core tenets of applied behavior analysis is philosophic doubt, meaning that as ABA practitioners, we should basically investigate that it's our duty to not believe everything that comes out of somebody's mouth, um, and that we should do our kind of due diligence to see if a treatment or a new intervention is actually like effective and good for a person. So, as a parent, as you start working with a BCBA, I would again counsel you to first make sure that they're compassionate. I think compassion is a safeguard against a lot of crappy ABA. Two, if that person is competent and confident that they believe and have optimism that what they're doing will change your child's life. Three, that they engage in some philosophic doubt, that if you bring up something that may not be behavior analytic, meaning you say, I'm curious about this supplement, which doesn't really fall in the scope of behavior analysis. What are your thoughts about that supplement? That the BCBA isn't immediately hot or cold. That we engage in a way that shows respect for other fields and other treatments, but that also, kind of is data driven. That is looking at, well, if it is working for your child, I think that's great. Or, let's look at that. And if it's not working for your child, like maybe we look at some other options. That they engage in this curiosity instead of this judgmental attitude. And that the people you talk to online or the sources you read engage in that same curiosity and maybe not hot or cold. As you know, I love ABA. I think it is awesome. I also am not, but have this binary thinking that I know, right? Like we talked about, that there are some ABA practitioners out there that aren't doing the best that they could. And as you talk to people online, I think that's a red flag. If it is all hot or cold, if they're like, ABA is the worst thing ever, or ABA is the best thing ever, engage in conversations with people that you can tell are taking a kind of well-rounded or graceful approach and curious approach towards ABA and towards other treatments as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we could even say, I mean, inherently, we've got some guiding principles, some dimensions of ABI. One of those is that it's effective, and I don't think that really just means like it solves this one thing or we teach this one thing. I think it's the grand scope of being effective. So it's not just like effective today, but it makes lasting changes that are meaningful. And so I mean, inherently, or I think I mean, I would probably think about this a little bit more, but like I believe that if it's not run in a way that makes a meaningful change for the better for somebody, you could probably even make the argument that it's not even ABA, and it could be conducted by a behavior analyst, but it may not be something that actually is ABA because I don't know. It's my favorite component of behavior analysis because I kind of like the pressure that it puts on us to be effective. I think it's really important that we have a little like accountability and an article that's held true for what are we at, like 50 years almost, like yeah, right around there,
Yeah.
58. So I think it is actually really important to have that constant understanding that it needs to be effective, and if it's not ABA. Even if somebody tells you it is, right? Like
Yeah.
who's a certified behavior analyst.
And I think it's okay to grant your behavior analyst grace and your child grace, and know that, I mean, you're probably, well, as a parent, you're probably very familiar that your child is incredibly unique. Jesse, I'm thinking back to a child that we worked with together once and spent maybe 6 months trying to help him understand, identify the difference between red, yellow, and blue. And in that time that, how many hours we spent working with him on that, on the side, we took him from barely talking at all to saying, jump, then jump, please. And then help jump, please. Help me jump on tramp, please. And what a huge, meaningful change that was for him, you know, and well, the red, yellow, blue wasn't effective and didn't make a meaningful change in his life. And so, I'm thinking back to those parents that like probably sat there and said, why, like, why is red, yellow, and blue? And ultimately we were like, yeah, red, yellow, and blue, like, screw that. Like, let's get this kid to ask anybody he knows to jump on the tramp with him, because that's a huge, meaningful change in his life. And so every behavior analyst is still learning, because we believe that there is no end to learning. And make sure, again, that there's compassion and that there's communication, that you're willing to talk with your behavior analyst and say, it's really important to us that he learns to ask for grandma, because grandma is so important to him and grandma will come over when he asks for her, or whatever it might be, right? And so communication, compassion are huge, and making sure that you're granting yourself, your child, and the team you're working with a little bit of grace, while also, expecting that core of compassion and communication.
Absolutely. Um, yeah. And what a great example that like it's not binary, right? Like we could probably say like because it wasn't effective and meaningful, like the colors, like um we could maybe say we're attempting ABA, right? But we were complete. I mean, we were doing awesome things, and this kid was doing awesome things because of like the work that he was putting in and like the supports he was receiving. I also just want to say that I think a lot of times we really, really overlook how hard kids work when they're getting services. We have like behavior technicians, there's a whole team, parents are involved, they're working hard. And I just think back to like a lot of the families that I've worked with who are just so amazing. And I look at kids who have made just incredible progress. And we get thank yous from families and really effusive praise. But really, like, these kids work so hard, and I think we don't always recognize that. The amount of effort that they're putting in to have the tool, learn the tools to be the person they want to be, is incredible sometimes. And so I kind of want to like put that out there too, because I think a lot of times we're so focused on who did what and all that stuff that like we forget that the kids like busting their ass. Sorry, but working so hard. And I think I don't know, for some reason I just felt like I really want to throw that out there too.
100%, Jesse. I love that you bring that up. I trail run, and I actually have a TikTok where I talk about ABA when I go run. And I made one a couple weeks ago. I was on this run, and it was uphill. And about a mile and a half in, I passed this group of people riding horses. And like, I'm like sweaty and whatever, and the guys are coming down, and the guy in the back looks at me and says, "This is the way to do it. We're not even breathing hard." And I just kind of like laughed at that, not knowing what to say. Like, are you trying to insult me or like brag about your dad's money that he can buy horses or what? But like, oh my gosh, it struck me so strongly that like, you are so proud of yourself and the horse is doing all of the work. Like, and and not to compare the kids we work with to horses, but right, they do that work. They work so hard. They're the ones learning. And I think as a parent myself and as a behavior analyst, sometimes we take credit or pride in the work that someone else is doing. I think there is nothing wrong with celebrating with a child and celebrating the child's progress and being so happy that we got to be a small part of them traveling this path. But again, like, that that compassion should come with a celebration of the child and their accomplishments, and not being prideful about like, wow, we got up there and we didn't even have to work hard. No, like that child was working super hard to reach that height, and we should be celebrating them for that.
Absolutely. I think that's like such a good and like impactful note um to kind of like wrap up season one with, because that's really like what it's about, right? It's about empowering. But one thing that I've done in other episodes that I'm now going to delegate to you, Andy, uh, is can you kind of come up with like, if like let's say, you know, people are getting, the people listen to this, they're in the car, there's, you know, they're weaving in and out of traffic, there's phone calls, whatever, and like they hear most of what you say, but like they're like really listening now. What are like the two or three takeaways that like you from this conversation that like you really want to be most salient for people who are listening?
Thanks, Jesse, for giving me that opportunity to sum up. And I listen to podcasts and I can totally agree. So if I were to sum up our conversation, it would be a message to parents that a behavior analyst is coming into your home with their RBT, and their job is to solve problems. They don't believe that your child is a problem, um, but that there are things happening that you wish weren't, or that you wish were, and they're going to use the tools they have, just like a plumber or dentist, to try and make that better for you, make your child's life better. At the end of the day, if you don't notice that that person has compassion, like look at other options, and know that if your child is making progress, that we believe that child is doing the work, right? And that we're going to celebrate with you and with them for all the hard work that they put in to make this happen.
Awesome. Andy, Daily man, thank you so much for like coming on. um I know your time is so valuable, as all of the guests this season, and I just think this is a really important thing to put out, to increase predictability, to like let people know what they can expect, to empower people, and I think just having you on to kind of tie everything together or touch on kind of a little bit from every episode, especially everybody's time is valuable, is really cool. So thanks for taking the time to come on, and I'm just really grateful to you. And yeah, what a cool way to wrap up season one.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I'm honored. I appreciate our friendship, and I especially appreciate the work that you do and the people you do it for.
Likewise, my friends.